for coming. So I'm a 5th grade teacher, and I so enjoy the 5th grade content. I think it's incredibly exciting, and unfortunately, my students do not, for the most part. When I say, guess what guys, we're about to spend 3 months talking about 1775, and they say, what? You know, getting them to actually sit still and engage in the content is the biggest challenge that we face. Myself and my partner teacher decided this year, instead of simply working with the curriculum and let's read a story, let's write a summary, let's read a story, let's write a summary, let's read a social studies text, and let's answer the questions at the end. We thought we've got to have some end product, some end goal that they're working towards that gets them to sustain their engagement throughout this long, because this is an entire unit. So this is what we came up with. So first, a little background on where my students come from. Washington Elementary is in San Leandro, which is an urban city right next to Oakland. The population is very similar to Oakland. We like to say that if you throw a stone from our school, it'll land in Oakland. And so there's about 400 students at my school. 68% of them are English learners, 70% on free or reduced lunch. We're in year 2 of PI, and so there's lots of tension within the district on how to raise our students' scores, how to raise their fluency levels. This year we just started implementing the RTI program, response to intervention, where we're doing testing upon testing upon testing to identify which students need the help, get them the relevant help that they need early, and hopefully remediate the skill gaps that they have. I'm the TARI site lead for my school. That's a Teacher Action Research Institute where we're focusing on arts integration. So this project fed directly from that work and figuring out ways to what we say is enchant the content. Just another look at our school demographics. Big Latino population. Latino and African American are our biggest populations at the school. And so whenever I teach anything, I start from those students and I say, what will excite my student Marcello? What will excite my student Andres? What will get them to want to sit in the chair and listen and engage? So it is a self-contained, multiple-subject classroom. One of the things they asked me to talk about is what challenges do my students have when they come walk in the door. Many of them lack the prior contextual knowledge to access certain topics in the curriculum. And so when we say, okay, let's open up this science text, let's open up this social studies text, and let's make inferences about what's there. Well, in order to make an inference, you have to have some sort of prior background knowledge that you're drawing upon, in addition to being able to actually read the text. So we've got sort of 2 problems to deal with, building their general fluency and comprehension, as well as giving them enough background information so that way they can have something to sort of fuse the information with. So we've got there, and then also just lacking the academic language and vocabulary to engage in the content is also a big, big issue in our classroom. So we try to give them as much practice using the academic vocabulary. I'll talk about how we did that in a little bit. The one thing, though, is that they are so curious and excited by technology. This year, we got smart boards in our classrooms, and the teachers are as excited as the students. And so we really tried to use the smart boards to, every time there is something that we can make visual, we make it visual. If, we're reading a story and it's about, I don't know, we're reading a story about something they've never heard before. We were talking about cinder blocks the other day, and I said, who knows what a cinder block is? And they said, they don't know. And so, you Google it and you put it up there, oh, cinder block. And so just giving them something to grab onto visually has been a huge, huge help this year. So moving on to the standards, like I said, this is a unit of study, and so it lasted about 6 to 8 weeks. So there were lots of language arts standards that we were trying to cover, and I sort of abbreviated just for the sake of not having too much text on the slides. So under the language arts strand, we were focusing on having them learn how to use and recognize synonyms, understanding text features, specifically maps, and what they're looking at when they see a map. Understanding text that's organized sequentially and in chronological order, because a lot of the reading was in chronological order. Discerning main ideas and concepts, that's a big thing that they need for everything they do in our classrooms, so we focused a lot on that. As I mentioned, drawing inferences and supporting them with textual evidence and prior knowledge. Infusing poetry. I also have a poetry background, which I didn't include in my bio so much, but it's poetry is so important to kids, and with this project we added a poetry element to it, and there were some of my kids who just took off when they found out that they were going to be able to write a poem about one of the stories. And then main conflict and plot, conflict and resolution was also a big key part. Additional language arts standards, as I said, this is a huge undertaking. Understanding characters' motives in a work of fiction. There's lots of fiction texts that we read. Writing clear and coherent essays, so there's a reading component, there's also a writing component. Writing multiple paragraph narratives, which is very, very hard for 5th graders. Whenever I give them a writing assignment, the first question is, how long does it have to be? And my response to them is usually, well, if you need to walk, how long do your legs need to be? So as long as they need to be. It needs to be as long as it needs to be. Really focused on writing strategies 1.6, getting them to want to edit and revise, because they're, once and done. That's, I'm done, what's next? And there are students who really take pride in that and say, you told me to do this and here it is. And so we talked a lot about the fact that artists never do one draft. You do it and then you do it again and then you do it again, and writers do that too. And so the idea that they were preparing something that would eventually be in this portfolio that they were proud of actually motivated them to say, okay, well, maybe I do need to do another draft. Maybe I do need to revise. Maybe I do need to go back and ask my peers for their input. So we really tried to get them to focus on improving their meaning and focus in their writing. So they wrote narratives, they wrote responses to literature, because we read a whole heck of a lot. Then there were the social studies standards, because of course this was a content-based curriculum. First of all, we were talking about the political, religious, social, and economic institutions that evolved during the colonial era. So what happened with these 13 colonies? How did it change the America that we are living in today? And getting students, number one, to care about that stuff, and then number two, to really sort of understand how it is that we all came to be living here in the United States. Second, we wanted to make sure that they understood the causes of the revolution, and then finally, the course and the consequences of the American Revolution. We really tried to focus on multiple perspectives, because a lot of times with issues like war, sometimes kids say, well, okay, who's the good guy and who's the bad guy? And from the very beginning, I said, you know what? It's never that cut and dry. They said, but wait a minute, America won, so we were the good guys, right? And, the British were the bad guys. And I said, well, let's talk about who was here in America. Let's talk about the colonists. Let's talk about the fact that not everyone wanted this war. Let's talk about the fact that some people were still loyal to Britain, and they had really good reasons for being loyal to Britain. Let's talk about the fact that some people were fighting, but they weren't free in their own country, that there were slaves fighting, that there were Native Americans fighting. And so really getting students to understand this war at that deep level and going beyond sort of a very cursory understanding of history. That was really important. And so then, of course, we brought art into it. We wanted them to make sure that they were analyzing, assessing, and deriving meaning from works of art, including their own. We especially focused on them analyzing their own artwork and doing lots of reflection on their work and on their peers' artwork. We did a lot of reflection work in this project. Also, developing and using specific criteria for assessment of their works of art. They actually did a gallery walk at the end where they assessed each other's work and they wrote about each other's work. And that's the other one there. And then finally, identifying and designing icons, logos, or other graphic designs as symbols for ideas and information. You'll see some of that in their journals. Okay. Am I doing okay on time? All right, so the next thing I'd like to talk about is the impact on their student learning and on their lives. Well, the first and foremost one is sustained student engagement. To have a unit that lasts, like I said, 6 to 8 weeks, and have kids come in every day and say, can we work on our journals today? Asking to do this project was so exciting for us. Usually it's like, oh no, not that again. After a week of something, they're, oh, can we do something else? And that's sort of just their generation, right? They're used to new things all the time. And so we really were excited that this actually sustained their engagement for a long time. They engaged in thoughtful self-reflection and peer critique. A lot of times, we say, okay, stand up and show your work, and then, let's get some critique from the audience, and they'll say, I like it because it's good, or I like that you use that color. And so we said, we're going to focus on actual, precise language. What do you actually have to say about that? What makes this good? And understanding how to do with critique, how to critique themselves, and how to critique their peers. Their acquisition of new vocabulary was huge. They were using words like firebrand and lobster back and freedom and independence and things, and actually using them correctly. And so that was really exciting, not only orally but also in their writing. And then, of course, demonstrating that they actually understood what happened in this war. And in some classrooms this might not be a huge feat, that last one, it's like it's in the content, it's one of the standards, they got it. When we started this unit, my kids didn't know where Britain was. I had to pull down a map and say, this is the East Coast, this is the Atlantic Ocean, here's England. Like, that's where we started from. And they're like, what? It's not part of America? So we had a long way to go. So as Stacy mentioned, the focus was also on cultural and linguistically responsive pedagogy. And so we try to do that every day with every single thing that we do because it's so important. With regard to this project, we tried to focus on each of the 4 R's in different ways. First of all, building relationships among students in the classroom is so important. We use a lot of participatory reading strategies like jump-in reading to keep them engaged in really long text. We read a novel as part of this unit called My Brother Sam is Dead, and it was partially a teacher read aloud and partially a student read. So they each had their own copy of the novel. It's about 200 to 300 pages long, and so it's actually about a 6th, 7th grade level of reading. So it's high level for most of them, and to keep them engaged, we had them jumping in as we read. They did a lot of musical shares or tea party. That's where they get up and walk around with some sort of information that they have while music is playing, and then they find 3 people and they share. A lot of give one, get one, learning from each other. Responsibility, we really wanted to make sure that students engaged in the process and said, you know what, you've got to take responsibility for your own learning. So we use Pass the Pen, where they're in small groups a lot and they're passing the pen, and every person has an opportunity and a right and a responsibility to share what they're learning. Student choice, I thought, built a lot of responsibility as well. This was a project where there were so many aspects of it that on any given day, a student could walk up and say, okay, what am I supposed to do? And I say, well, what would you like to work on today? They've got a menu of things that they could choose from once we introduce each one of the assignments. Okay, well, I want to do my poem today. Well, I want to work on my Paul Revere message today. Well, I want to work on my colonial flag today. And so there was so much choice that it made them responsible for whatever they were focusing on at that time. We definitely tried to build respect for each other and respect for the work that we were, the content that we were talking about. As I said, a lot of students are struggling readers, so we made sure that nobody was reading by themselves if they weren't comfortable with that. We wrote poetry to explore the story about a slave who was also a soldier, and so we tried to get the students to envision what the perspective of that slave soldier was as he was in a prison ship. And so we said, you know what, poetry is a really great way to show your respect for something, to sit down and take the time to put yourself in that person's shoes and create this work that represents this very painful and trying time. We explored the roles of women and African Americans in the war as, again, a way of gaining respect, respecting the cultures in the classroom and respecting the cultures of the people who were involved in the war. Finally, relevance, probably one of the more important parts for my kids, because if it's not relevant to them, they just don't care. And so we did a lot of call and response, and I mean call and response from the very basic attention getters to, you know, when I say colonists, you say patriots, and, you know, colonists, patriots, and just getting them to constantly use that vocabulary just all day long. We were trained in GLAD, and so we used the GLAD chants, but we sort of took them to another level in that we wrote some of our own GLAD chants and we added images to them, so we made PowerPoint presentations, and we had the students come in every day and they were marching and they were doing chants that related to the Revolutionary War, just again to sort of bathe them in the vocabulary and the content constantly and make it relevant to them, and they love to chant out loud. And then the identity exploration piece, we actually came up with an assignment where they were first exploring the meaning of a flag, and I'll show you those in just a second, and why the colonists needed their own flag. And then we said, okay, so now that you understand how symbolic a flag can be to a people, you're going to make your own flag that represents your identity. And so then they made personal flags, and that was the bit of identity exploration that they did. So it's okay, I want to move on to the student work. Just give you a quick overview, and then I want to show you some pictures, and hopefully we'll have time for you to look through some of their portfolios and see them actually for yourself. So after 8 weeks of, or during this 8 weeks of study time, the students created various art-based and writing projects. The focus was really on the writing, and then there was also the art that we infused in. The students got to choose which pieces to showcase in their portfolio. So although you have a list of everything they could have possibly done, there are there are certain pieces that they chose to put in there. and most of the pieces were, again, both written and artistic. I think I'll go through the whole thing and then I'll go to the slides. So the final thing that we focused on was assessment. There was ongoing peer editing and assessment where the kids looked at each other's work and gave each other feedback. There were what we call the SHOM cards. The SHOM is the studio habits of mind that we are trying to teach the students that, good artists engage when things are difficult. Good artists are great observers of their work and observers of other people's works. And so there's a list of 8 studio habits that we're trying to get the students to practice when they're doing art and when they're also doing writing and other language arts activities. So we created these little cards, and I can show you them just really quickly. You'll see them as I pass them around. And there's nothing magical at all about the cards. They just have one of the studio habits on them each. They're all a different color. And so we say when you're done with an assignment, you may go and get yourself a SHOM card and you may write your reflection about that particular assignment. So the reflection's not all at the end, it's ongoing. This one says express, and it says, one thing that's unique about my work is that I wrote this letter on behalf of James Fortin. So this is one of our, it was a poem actually that the student did. So we wanted them definitely to reflect. They did a student reflection sheet, which is included in most of these portfolios. And then at the end, we did a gallery walk with a peer assessment sheet as well. Just evidence of student learning in both language arts and social studies would be a great thing, because it is a cross-disciplinary lesson. And like I said, if there's time, I'd love for you to actually pick up the journals and look through them. We were really excited about the fact that we were able to use recycled materials, first of all, to make this project. In years past, we've tried to find things and it ended up costing us a lot of money, and we said, you know what? We've got a box of old manila portfolio of these folders that we're not using and nobody needs them, and they're in the teacher's room, and so we grabbed them and we thought, you know what, if we put these brads in them, they kind of look a little bit militaristic and they kind of fit the theme, and so we thought, you know what, this is what we're using. So let me go ahead and get this started. Okay, so the covers, we allowed students to collage, and the thing that they got really excited about was that they got to cut up their social studies books. And that was revolutionary in itself, because we'd already read the unit and they're consumable. And we thought, what are you going to do with these at the end of the year but toss them in your corner in your room? And so we said, okay, go back through the units, find some of the headings, because we were talking about text organization, that some of the things that really stuck with you, some of the things that were really important to you. Find some of the pictures that really spoke to you as we read, and we had them use that as decoration for their unit. This is a mini book. It's a quick draw for the My Brother Sam is Dead novel. As I said, it's a long, thick, high-level novel, and so the students were writing and drawing as we were reading that book. This is their page on synonyms, words that means the same thing or similar, and so the student actually did some art related to lobster back, red coat, sorry about that, but words that related to the Revolutionary War that were actually synonyms. This is a map. You can see one of the SHOM cards up there. I envisioned how I was going to color in the colonies, the rivers, and the seas. This is a timeline that they used a sentence strip to sort of pull it out. And again, nothing magical about the art. It's simply an interesting way to display the information versus just writing it on simple binder paper. This was an announcement that Paul Revere might have written. I was looking at the perspective of Paul Revere. What happened with the Boston Tea Party? And, the last thing, get your guns, the lobsterbacks are coming. Here's another one of Paul Revere's message to Concord and Lexington. And this is a student who, Concord, he's thinking about the Concord here in Northern California, and, getting them to sort of broaden their perspective. This is one of the pictures that went with Paul Revere's message. We spent a lot of time on Paul Revere. There were a couple stories that we read. And so he's using crayon on the side to show the background there. This is a letter from a family member named Katie in a story where the child, I'm going to actually pause this because I love the student voice that comes through in this. Go back a second. So we read a story about a family of loyalists who were totally against the war. And when I initially brought this in, the students were at a point where they said, you know what? We're totally on the Patriot side. We need to get rid of King George because he has no idea, he has no business taxing us. And we said, well, what about the other side? And so we started to explore the multiple perspectives. And this little girl, Katie, was locked in a trunk in her family's household. It's part of the Hoot and Mifflin curriculum. And rebels came into her house and robbed her house while she was in there. So we said, what if that was you and you were locked in the trunk? You need to write a friendly letter, which is one of our standards, on behalf of this character, Katie. And so the students started out with, "Dear Grandma, you're lucky you're not in America." You know, acknowledging the fact that Katie's relatives are in Britain, and so, you know, a lot of things have happened. The Patriots are dressed as Indians and jumped on a ship, and they threw 10,000 pounds of tea into the Boston Harbor. And so going on, you know, it's summarizing text, it's showing understanding, but it's doing it in a way that really engaged and involved the kids. Yeah, it didn't seem like a party. I love that when you can sort of hear their voice come through in their writing. So like, and the fact that we got a date right. Like, it's not 2011, right? That's great. This is another version of the Katie's trunk. It was really hard to breathe. It was dark. It was also very muffled. That was one of our vocabulary words. Someone opened the lid and began, okay. This is a recount of the Boston Tea Party again. That was the thing that the students were really interested in, so we focused a lot on the Boston Tea Party and recounting the events. This is another student who did Boston Tea Party but decided to design theirs like a scroll because that's what it might look like back in those days. And like, get ready, the British are coming. So we were really excited about that. These are colonial flags. They made those out of construction paper and stickers. Some students made the flag, just made the flag, other students made the flag and actually did writing about it, about the history of the flag. There's an example of that one, and so they included that with their art. And again, it was the freedom and the choice to be able to say, what would you like to do today? Would you like to finish your flag? Would you like to review your writing? What would you like to do? And then this is, after the colonial flags, we did the personal flag. So what's important to you? We know it was important to the colonists. And you know, why did you choose this? You know, family and art are important to me. Love is important to me. This student made her flag look like the flag of Mexico, the Virgin de Guadalupe. And so we said, you know, whatever it is that resonates with you, that's what we want you to make. And they love that portion of the project. The student chose to put a bear on it, and he says, you know, the bear is strength, and the red is love because it's the color of a heart, and white is peace because it's the color of the peace sign. And so we were really excited about that. I'm going to pause this one really quickly. This was the poetry piece. Again, we were writing, the students were writing as though they were a slave named James Fortin who was trapped on a prison ship. And so we spent a lot of time envisioning what would that slave actually be thinking of, and what would they be feeling in this hull of the ship. You know, something that is totally out of context for kids from San Leandro. And they were able to create these amazing poems. So he writes, darker than a dungeon, so many rats dashing around. We talked about showing, not telling, right? Spiders everywhere, everyone moaning, I don't want to be a slave. I hope the abolitionists, oh my gosh, they used the word abolitionists. I hope the abolitionists and patriots come, there is only water and a hard loaf of bread. I'm so sad. And the other thing about this one that sort of was surprising to me, that it really hooked some of the kids, is that simply the use of this antique paper, we went and got them some antique paper at Michael's, and we got a quill and some ink and let them sign it at the end. And that was like, if you finish your poem, you get to use the quill and the ink. Oh my goodness, we saw kids working so fast simply to use that, you know, that medium. And so just an example of how little bits of infusion of art can huge, you know, rancid fetid air. Like, my goodness, the vocabulary that they used was incredible. And so I was really excited with their outcomes, and different students were more successful in different parts of the project than others, but in general, I think they did a great job.
So what I was thinking, we can move into the protocol. We have like 15 minutes, so
okay.
Everybody can, we'll pass out a portfolio to you, and we'll have, let's do like 4 minutes of quiet time where you can look through, think about what are some things you're observing, and then we're going to share that out and kind of share, and I'll kind of prompt you with different reflections. So there might be enough that everybody could take one or two, so that you can look through, think about the student learning. Soraya wanted us to focus on the studio habits of mind for the standards, so she wanted that rather than the RLA and the writing.
Well, I see one of those here. My mistake helped me, and there's the sentence starter there under stretch and explore. my mistake helped me to make my work the best that I could. So here evidently is evidence that here's a student who didn't just do it one time, but had to reflect on what they wanted to do and develop what they did.
Or you can share out anytime you want. It's just
Some of their studio habits of mine overlap with some English language arts skills. And, you know, it would be really interesting to use the similar thing in some of the drawing conclusions and statistical strategies that use these, but some of these actually did bring up the English, which was really, really fascinating. So.
Well, I saw evidence of students using those studio habits in their language arts and social studies. So they're really thinking of it in terms of student habits of mind.
Absolutely.
I saw evidence of organization. There was one here where a child writes a rather lengthy passage about how they had to choose exactly what they were going to put in, and there was so much, but they had to sit down and choose what was going to be included.
We've used this sheet in the past, just with the sentence starters. We said, you know what, this is a lot of text for a 5th grader to digest. And if you put it on a construction paper card that's in a pretty color, we have a show wheel in our room and the colors match the colors that you see there. So if you want to go get a green express card, then we put this up and they say, okay, I'm going to do express, and they know to go to the sentence frame that works for them. And so those shown cards are in pockets on our wall around the room. And so at any point, at any piece of writing or any piece of artwork that they do, they can always go and grab a shown card. And we actually introduced it to them as earning a shown card. So if you finish your product and you're ready to reflect on it and be metacognitive about it, you can go and earn your shown card. And so they were very excited about getting their shown cards.
It's neat for parents to read these and go, oh.
Yeah, for parents and as a teacher. I mean, you know, as I said, 8 weeks later, it's hard for me to look back and go, okay, what were you thinking when you did this, and why do you think this is a really good piece of work? And so I tell them, you know, you got to make your thinking visible. You've got to tell me what was going on in your brain when you did this. And these really, it's a quick and easy way for them to do that.
When looking at especially the content of the American Revolution, before we go into cultural linguistic responsiveness, how about for meeting the standard of social studies unit, of allowing the students to understand the perspectives and then also the events that led up to the American Revolution? So you can discuss how the standard of that was met with the students.
I'm sorry, I came in late, but was there some standards for the visual art?
Yes.
So we were focusing on them on how they arranged the material in the portfolio. The focus was really social studies and language arts, but focusing on collage, focusing on an aesthetic valuing, and focusing on critique of their work and critique of their peers' artwork using the studio habits of mind.
Did they develop their own assessment rubrics?
We developed one, and we had them work with the tool, which actually it's in your green packet, but I did want to show that was sort of one of our culminating assessment rubric. What I told them was, you know what, when I look at your portfolio, this is the first page I'm going to, and I want to see, first of all, what you think was great. So something great that I did was, and so they picked the one part of their journal that they were most proud of, and then showing what you know, I'm proud of this work because it shows my understanding of the Boston Tea Party, of the causes of the revolution, of how to, you know, draw this picture of Paul Revere. And then going back to the studio habits of mind, which again was our big focus. You know, it says, while completing this assignment, this particular assignment that you chose, which studio habit of mind did you use the most? And so then getting them to reflect even more, you know, beyond the 1 or 2 sentences that they might have written on the shown card, but a little bit more detail of which shown you used and how that was used. And then finally, saying, okay, well, how could I have made it even better? Even though we're towards the end, if there's one thing I could change about my writing, about my artwork, and about my overall presentation, what would it be?
So Soraya, I can see that you've done a really powerful job of getting kids to apply artistic mind to how they are learning in social studies and language arts. Can you talk a little bit more about the actual art making that kids do in your classroom, either with the arts teacher or in your classroom?
Oh, sure. We try to infuse art as often as possible. A lot of times lately we've been doing a lot of work with oil pastels, and you saw that with some of the work with students with their personal flags. Oil pastels, watercolors, anything that gets them using their hands with the artwork is great. And so the thing that I like to remember about art is that I grew up in the time where it was write an essay and you get to draw a picture. And so what we tried to do this year really is to flip that notion of maybe let's start with the art. So before you write your Paul Revere's message, maybe you're going to draw a picture or you're going to create an image of Paul Revere that inspires you to do the writing. And so that's sort of the way that we tried to approach it with using the art to inspire the writing.
Was there any instruction given on figure drawing or drawing a horse?
Oh, absolutely. We had to do that, and we're actually still doing that because we're focusing now on the Hoon Mifflin theme, One Land, Many Trails, which talks a lot about the African American cowboys in the American prairies, and they're doing a watercolor image of horses right now. And even though we did all of this with Paul Revere, they're going, we don't know how to draw a horse. So we went back to the figure drawing of how to draw a horse and how to make it look like the horse is running versus standing still. And so I'm not an art teacher, and so I definitely work with our art specialist Susan Deming to get some tips on that. But what we tell them is, whatever you create, it's representative of what you're thinking and it's representative of what you're writing, and so I think they did a great job.
So we have about 2 minutes, so if you could hop back to the one slide with the cultural linguistic responsiveness.
No problem.
And I thought if each one of us, if you want to just focus on either relationship, responsibility, respect, or relevance, think about just one of those that you want to reflect on, and you can just share with Soraya an example of where you saw that within the student work. It could be in the unit that she presented, or it could be in the student artifact that you saw. So any one of those that you just want to share with her.
I saw a lot of identity exploration through the creation of flags. That was very cool.
I saw a lot of respect for the feelings of the slave, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'd say I saw quite a bit of respect for the poetry writing. The kids really, from what I read, they really seemed to get into that and expressing themselves through that.
I saw student choice, because not every journal was the same, right? And so I got to see that they got to choose.
And then we're going to let you have the kind of final word. So any other final thoughts you'd like to share with us? Or
Just that this project, it was a big challenge to pull off just because of the time that it took, and there's so many elements, and having the students not get lost in all of the things that we were asking them to produce. The fact that I think someone said that they saw empathy in the work, that was one of our biggest goals, was that these kids would care about, learn about, and show respect for something that happened so long ago, where they barely care about things that happened last week. And so that was huge, and to do so in a very respectful way. I have one student in my class that I just want to share with you. His name is Dee, and he doesn't care about very much other than walking around the room. He's a very sort of active student and is constantly out of his seat. You probably have one as well. And my day is, do you sit down, do you sit down, do you sit down? And with this project, especially when we got to the poetry section, he was running across the room, because he often runs across my room, but running across the room to show me his drafts and say, look at what I did, and is this okay? And what about this line? What do you think about this word? Like, down to the verb level. And so the excitement on his face just reinforced for me that this is worth it, and the students are getting something important out of it.
Now, how long has your school been an arts integration school?
This is the 3rd year of with the TARI project.
Okay, because we're going there next year.
It's so powerful.
Is
and
it? Okay.
It's exciting because we get to present to our own staff. Myself and there's about 4 other arts integration teachers at the school, and so we get to bring them not only ideas for how to use it with language arts, but our art teacher gives them art technique, and so it's really exciting. And the teachers are thinking, oh gosh, I want to do this as much as I can in my room.
Is the TARI project specific to your school, or is it a wider?
It's through ACOE.
And it's district-wide.
District-wide,
yeah. And
Oh,
also,
okay.
it's the only school district where it's completely across the district, but there are many other schools that do district.
You said TARI project?
Right, it stands for Teacher Action Research Institute, with a focus on arts integration. So we're researching our own practice, and we have a research question, but it's under the lens of arts integration.
Have you seen test scores at your school site go up since integrating the arts?
We have actually, especially with our 4th grade. We've seen a big jump, and just the daily student engagement, I think, is the real measure of what's going on there.
Well, Soraya, we want to thank you so much for presenting and sharing your work. And as a reminder, she's going to have a chance to upload all of these resources and her lesson plans that she did also for the unit, so everybody will have access to it. So when you go home, you can also share with colleagues too. It'll be on our website. So thank you very much.
Thank you.